Hello, teacher and classmates. The idea of this presentation is to tell you a little bit of how the American literature got established. So that's the reason of the title of my presentation, which is A Walk Through the American Literature. This presentation is done by Juan Carlos Candelo Millán, and it is presented to teacher Angela Romero in the University of San Buenaventura in Bogota. I hope you like my presentation and, you know, pay a lot of attention. Okay, we're going to begin this presentation by talking about the Native American literature, which was orally transmitted and it was based on nature and spiritual experiences. Another aspect of this kind of literature it was that it was created by several Indian tribes, such as the Navajo, the Iroquois, Onondaga, and Modoc. The stories were mainly myths, legends, folk tales explaining customs, religious rites, riddles, and epics. They also had lyrics and narratives with poetic language like haikus. The haikus is that Japanese type of poem that consists of maybe it's three lines. The first line has like five syllables. The second line has seven syllables, and then the third line has five syllables again. The themes were mostly life lessons and morals of their own tribes. In this Native American literature, you can find The Earth on the Turtle's Back by the Onondaga Northeast Woodlands tribe, When Grizzlies Walked Upright by the Modoc tribe. You can find another literature piece, which is the Navajo Origin Legend by the Navajo tribe, and the Iroquois Constitution by the Iroquois tribe. Those are the ones that I have, and we're going to go now to the literature of exploration. Okay, regarding the literature of exploration, as you all know, you know that Christopher Columbus went out to the ocean trying to find other lands, and he arrived, you know, to the Americas in 1492, 1493. And what happened was that America had its first contact with the Europeans. This guy, Thomas Harriot, wrote a brief and true report of the Newfound land of Virginia. This other guy, John Smith, who was a romantic, and we owe the story of Pocahontas. He wrote about his experience with the Indians, with the Native Americans. And at this time, mostly all the writings were diaries, letters, travel journals, ship logs, and financial backers. Well, as the name says it, they most of this literature, what it talked about was how their experiences in these explorations that they were doing, because for example, in the 17th century there was another wave of colonists who came from Europe and other parts of the world, and they brought their families. They brought their farming implements. They also brought their craftsman tools, and they brought all these things. So I suppose that mainly their writings were articles or diaries that talked about their experiences in exploring different parts of the world. Okay, well, during the colonial period with the Puritans, uh, no, you know that these people landed in Plymouth, and they were separated from the Church of England. These writers, they claimed that human beings were for the glory of God. The Bible was the expression of God's will. John Calvin's motto was ethic of hard work and strict discipline. These people normally wrote about theological studies, Himes' histories, biographies, journals, and diaries. They also talked about, and they also talked about, well, within their writings about self-examination and spiritual insights. And fiction or drama were considered a sin. What I would like to do now is maybe mention some of the most significant um, writings in this time. So we have, for example, the General History of Virginia by John Smith, which was written in 1964. No, I'm sorry, 1624. We have of Plymouth Plantation by William Bradford in 1630. In the year 1640, we have Bay Sound Book by Richard Mather. We have also Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God by Jonathan Edwards in 1641. We have Actually, this is a very important book because this was the first published book, and it was published in England because they didn't have a printing press in the United States. And it was written by a woman. Her name is Anne Bradstreet, and the name of the book was To My Dear Loving Husband, which was written in 1678. We have another one which is called Huswifery by Edward Taylor, written in 1684. We also have the New England Primer and The Cases of Conscience Concerning Evil Spirits by Richard Mather. Okay, now let's talk about the Enlightenment. Some of the general remarks that I have here on this presentation are that writers were influenced by European styles. Writing was mainly public writing, such as newspapers, almanacs, magazines, speeches, and letters. This kind of literature referred to politics using journalists and printers. And the writers at this time, they kind of stopped talking about religion and they focused more on science and logic. That's the reason I have this image here about living in the age of reason. Um, these writers focus on the relationship between America and Britain and the nature of the government. Like I said before, they stopped talking about religion and how we should glory our God, and they focused more on maybe political models and the kind of structures of the government and all that stuff. At this time, James Otis came out with the taxation without representation is a tyranny, and Benjamin Franklin used many aphorisms in his almanacs. One of them was called Poor Richard's Almanac and the Autobiography. Other literary pieces that you can find at this Enlightened era or Latin period are the speech in the Virginia Convention by Patrick Henry, and To His Excellency General Washington by Phyllis Whitley. Obviously, in the year 1776, you all know the Declaration of Independence by Thomas Jefferson and the Common Sense by Thomas Paine. Well, regarding the Romanticism, I have to say that it's focused on imagination, emotion, nature, and individuality. This kind of literature went from political and personal to entertaining purposes. American topics were introduced. As you all know, like I was saying before, most of these topics were brought from England. Now, in this kind of literature, the topics were mainly American. The poetry included rhyme. The sentences began to rhyme one another, syllables, and all the kind of rhythms that they have, like limericks and quatrains and cinquens and couplets and all that stuff. All those kind of rhythms were introduced. A parable is designed to convey some religious principles, moral lessons, or general truths. Some of their literary pieces are R.I.P. Van Winkle by Washington Irving, I have here The Legend of the Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving, The Leather Stocking Tales by James Fenimore Cooper, The Devil and Tom Walker by Washington Irving, and The Old Ironsides by Oliver Wendell Holmes. Okay, and finally, we're going to talk about the dark romanticism. I know there are other called eras in literature, like realism and others, like the literature of the Civil War. But we're going to end this presentation talking about the dark romanticism. Okay. Some of the general remarks. Well, the tone is mostly morbid and dark. It focuses on the dark side of human nature and flaws like greed, selfishness, hypocrisy, guilt, and fear. And it demonstrates what happens when we let all these negative feelings take over our actions. Okay? Some of the literature pieces that we have in this dark romanticism are, for example, The Psalm of Life by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. We have The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. The Self Reliance by Ralph Waldo Emerson. We have The Raven. I've read that one before, by Edgar Allan Poe. We have The First Snowfall by James Russell Lowell. Um, the Civil Disobedience by Henry David Thoreau. And we have The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Oh, and obviously we have Moby Dick by Herman Melville. Okay, teacher and classmates, well, that's the end of my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it and learned as much as I did. Um, you know, what I can tell you is that, I didn't know anything about literature. And when you start reading about literature, you kind of begin to go back in time, and you start knowing like where it comes from, and why they wrote the way they wrote, and because it was the context that they lived in. So this was a very good experience for I suppose for all of us, and I learned a lot, and I hope you guys learned as much as I did. I thank you for listening, and I see you the next time. Bye bye.